Okay, Michael, you know how we start all the time. I think we are good. We are live now. Let's go.
Yeah, I just want to make this point, Martin, is that I think that people at Riverside, it's good to see you, by the way. I think the people at Riverside are actually watching our podcast. The amount of times that we've made fun of this thing starting at 6 and now the countdown starts at 5, I think they just gave up, like on that
Yeah,
little sort of
exactly. That's
that
funny.
that idiosyncrasy was starting to drive me a little bit crazy. And Martin, this is kind of interesting too. I want to give props to the team from Mason, and I'll tell you why.
Mhm.
You know, you and I spent a lot of time talking about quality, right? But I
We did.
remember we were supposed to record with them, I don't know, a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
and they decided, you know what? We want our sound to be as high quality as possible. So let's wait until we're in a better situation. And I cannot tell you how much I love this idea of focusing on quality. It's so
Same here.
important. So
Same
let's
here. It made
welcome
me
them.
super happy.
Yeah, it's super happy. Let's welcome them. Kausambi Manjita and Barada Sahu, co-founders of Mason. It's great to have you here. How are you two doing today, by the way?
Super excited and stoked to be here. And I think as high quality as possible, being as possible, being the disclaimer there. But yeah, I hope that it's much better than that day. And, we are going to have clear blue skies in terms of sound and video and everything, and and a lot of fun. We've been laughing quite a bit even before we started recording. So
Let's just keep that going. But you know what I mean, right? In other words, it's better not to do anything than to do it kind of halfway, right? And I love this idea. That's why when we decided on that day, let's do it later, the whole point was let's get as high quality as possible. And that made me smile. Quality makes me smile. Anyway, why don't you tell us a little bit about your backgrounds? Kaus, can I call you that? And I think I heard you call Barada Barry. Did I get that right?
yeah.
Okay. So let's start with you, Kaus. Let's get a little bit of your background for some context, and then we'll let Barry do that as well.
Yeah. Well, I've been, obsessed with doing something in technology for a large part of my life. And when I was really young, my dad introduced me to Isaac Asimov. I got like completely obsessed with the whole science fiction genre.
Oh, wow.
And I realized that even though there's a lot of creativity and people that are very important for me as an individual, somewhere tying in technology with creativity and people was where I wanted to be at. So I would say the rest of the life until now has been figuring out what that means and kind of meandering my way towards product management, and then eventually doing my own startup in product-led growth in some way. And yeah, that's and specifically if I'm talking about the sector, I've been in e-commerce technology, building products for e-commerce for pretty much my entire career. So
I love
so
it.
yeah, that's a bit about me. Yeah.
Barry, how about you? You're going to have to try really hard to top my dad introduced me to Isaac Asimov, by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that's one of those common things that we share. This love for science fiction. I think both of us kind of quite love that, along with a few other things that we kind of love working on together. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's been like building products and building these products with care. I think this was one of those points that you're talking about, Michael, which is about craft and quality.
Yeah.
And for us, it was really like super important that whatever we build out is also like an extension of what we identify ourselves with. And so building these products that we can really use, which are really crafted under the hands of creators, that's what kind of got Cos and us together to kind of work together on these problems. And yeah, I've been building products for a while now, built a few in the last company that we kind of Cos and I worked together, which is the Mintra Group. That's where we kind of came together on this problem of how we can solve things for brands and for merchants and creators to kind of grow their businesses.
You said Mahindra, right?
Mintra.
Mintra, sorry, excuse me. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
understood this.
Yeah.
I want to
So
back up
this
for a
was-
second. Yeah, sorry. I just want to back up for a second and talk a little bit, and either one of you can grab this, right? But I want to talk a little bit about science fiction into science and take away the fiction part of it. I actually think it's really important, right, to have this interest your whole life in technology, because I do think that it's this dream into what can be that
Yeah.
kind of motivates science fiction at some level, and then to be able to then take technology and build something that was almost impossible to build 5, 7, pick a number, 10 years ago, has to be super exciting for both of you, no?
No, I totally agree because for me, and that's why, working in tech in some way or the other and meeting great, developers and engineers and people with technology, strong technology, building power like Barry, right? It just opened up a new world for me in specific. I don't code. I've never been great at like figuring that bit out.
Neither do I.
But the fact but the fact that you can imagine and dream and look ahead into the future, and this is what can be possible. And then you have artists and these are artists and creators like Barry and others like him who can actually orchestrate that and make that into a reality, right? I think you have to love technology, but you definitely have to love people in some way, because if you don't care about people, you can't bring these awesome imaginary ideas to life.
So you've just touched on so many things that are so important to me. This idea of technology and art and people cannot be separated from each other. And with all of the recent news, this may seem off topic, but I don't really think so. With all this recent news on Dali, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and this argument about, is that really art if it's being generated by artificial intelligence? Barry, I'm super curious what you think about this contention right now that's happening in the tech world, particularly as it relates to the creation of art, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's more like synthesizing. We have always been better. Once we've had machines and technology kind of assist us in terms of creation, it goes back to, by the way, like uh, how Steve Jobs really once said that the computer was a bicycle for the mind.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think we've just been making those bicycles a little better along the way. That's really
Yeah.
how we got to kind of think about it, right? And I think as we kind of get to kind of freeing us up from these everyday things that kind of are monotonous, and we kind of get away from that, we really tend to think of technology as being able to help us express better, make things better, and make more wonderful things. And I think this is the way that I kind of really see this convergence of technology and art really coming together in the future. As we kind of create music together, music has shifted to become like there's this really great new musicians coming these days who kind of uh, infuse what you say techno beats to what we can do with acoustic together, and that's just incredible kind of music that's coming out of that.
Yeah, but it's such a great point, right? Because with all this talk about like what art is and what art isn't, the synthesizer, these chords have been around for decades, right? I don't know when these things were invented, but like 40, 50 years ago. And no one argues today whether those are a great part of music, but it's not just that that's being created. And I think this is the whole future of how technology is going to get used. It's like this hybrid connectivity between what people want, what makes their lives better, and how can technology enhance that. Does that make sense, Kaus?
I think end of the day, like the reason we have tools and technology is because we want to express something and get our thoughts that are in the head out there. I mean, as simple as I'd say when we first started realizing that there's fire and we can create fire and we can like kind of cook on top of it. I mean, that's just technology, and that was a manifestation of an idea. So it's
Such a
always
great point.
communicating and putting our ideas across to others is what I think very intrinsically that's what we always want to do as humans. That's what we always want to communicate our ideas and our thoughts and translate it into something that we can give to others and they can utilize it too. So I think technology and tools have always been a form of communication.
I agree. And if brands themselves, right? So if I talk to you about the most famous brands in the world, Nike, you can probably tell me their slogan, just do it, right? Like all these things about brands. And if brands are really about storytelling, talk to me a little bit about how you think then technology gets used to tell brand story. And more importantly for me, right? Big companies have been using tech or been telling stories forever. But how do we then democratize that down to smaller or even emerging brands to start to tell those stories better? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Barry, why don't you pick that
Yeah,
up?
yeah. So I think it
And
was,
I'll add on.
yeah, I think it's this case of like big tech and what you say right now, tech being more accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
This big tech really being more accessible. And again, like I like to give this analogy of Steve Jobs quite a lot because I kind of
Go.
adore the man too. But really, it's about looking at whether IBM was really the computer company and really Apple made it really this creator company, these computers into the hands of creators. And to a large extent, if you look at it,
Wow.
Amazon is kind of one of those, the IBM like force in commerce and in for brands today, right? Because it kind of consolidates everything. There's everything that you can find. It's easy to launch, but at the same point of time, you lose your identity as a brand. You lose your identity as a creator. For
Because
us,
you
it
lose
was
your,
based.
because you, sorry, can I just jump in? Because you lose your connectivity to the people that are actually accessing the brand. I
Absolutely.
love this idea, and I've been trying to figure out a way to manifest this idea. And IBM is maybe the perfect example into Amazon. And I've not heard anybody say this before you, but when I was growing up, and even when I was in college, if you had told somebody that IBM was going to get disintermediated by smaller tech companies or by newer tech companies, they would have laughed at you. It was so
Mm.
powerful and it felt like this unstoppable machine. And I think in the same way, and I've talked about this a lot, I think Amazon could just be the beginning of what e-commerce is meant to look like. The whole point of this show, right? The reason why we call it e-commerce undercover is because we don't think it's solved yet. And maybe Amazon is just like the on-ramp into what it's meant to be, and it's not there yet. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I think this is just right, as you're saying. Like it's about really at this tipping point of where commerce is in the hands of the creators, and commerce is really getting more and more closer to these brands, and these brands are being created by these people who really love their craft, and they want to take this craft out and express it to the hands of the people who also kind of interact and consume it, right? But the
Right.
tools for them still lie centralized, these
Yeah.
IBM like tools with teams like Amazon or like really big marketplaces, right? And I think this is where we're hoping to kind of help creators and brands make this breakthrough, bring more accessible tools where they can get it in their own hands and bring more creator friendly tools really at the heart of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's basically how I see commerce as evolving, is becoming more independent commerce, which can really flourish, but and keeping the brand at the heart of it, and keeping the connection with the customer at the heart of it.
And that kind of ties back to what you're talking about IBM versus Apple, is that it's the same product, but the lens is different,
Completely.
right? Right. And that shifts everything, that changes the game.
How important is the customer experience for a brand? Right. In other words, you can sell something great in a terrible store and a terrible experience, and no one's going to buy it. And you can sell kind of a marginal or almost good product in an incredible experience. In other words, when I go to a restaurant, right, like the food to me is kind of only 40% of what happens there. The restaurant and the service that I get, particularly after I'm done eating, is so much more important, right, than the food that I eat at any particular time. And how does that translate into what's happening in the e-commerce space and where you think it should be going?
Yeah. And I'll get started, and I want Barry to add on because I know he has very, very strong thoughts around it. But I mean, it's this it's all about, end of the day, when you're buying as a consumer, and I'm taking the consumer lens now. Like, I need to buy something, and I'm
Right.
looking at brands around to kind of fulfill that need or that trigger of some need, right? Some kind of need, and there are a ton of options. It's very equal to content when you look at it today. It's a lot of information, a lot of content that's out there, a lot of brands that are out there, right? And why do I choose what I choose? When I go to an Amazon, it's very clear. I don't know the brands. I'm just looking at like a Craigslist of products,
Right.
and I'm probably just kind of like, price, whatever, blah, and I'm out, right? But when I'm looking out at the rest of the world minus Amazon, and I'm looking at brands, then I'm kind of looking for a connection, right? That's something
Yeah.
that triggers me, something that makes me pause and say, hey, I want to kind of double down on this. I want to double click on this and look at why are they talking about sustainability? Why are they talking about, shoes that are made out of recycled plastic? Like, what is it? It's something in that triggers my connection to that brand, and then the rest of of course, your optimizations or whatever, your funnel starts happening, right? But
Right.
that trigger point is essentially some connect that I feel. It's not always as simple as, hey, can I just put a video out there that's like very catchy, but what is catchy in the video? That's again the connection, right? And so experience is very, it's as strong. There are many different levers to that experience. It could be, when you're looking at the restaurant analogy, it could be the reviews that you are looking at. Other people talk about the restaurant. It's the cuisine. It's how does that restaurant look? What does it make you feel? Like, is it artsy? Is it like cute? Is it kitschy? Like what's there? That's kind of.
No
So
kitsch,
all
please.
those, no kitsch for you.
Not for me.
So. So I guess all of these different, decisions that you're taking to form a connection end of the day, and all of this are different levers for experience, right? And
Right.
without that experience that you can package consistently at every point that a consumer like me is interfacing with you, if you are breaking that experience at any point in time, you are unable to form that connection, right? So experience is super core. It's the starting point, however, right?
Barry?
Yeah, I think there's this. I don't know if you guys have read this book by Danny Meyer, who's one of the owners of Union Shack group, and they basically own Shake Shack. Um, Basically, he's got this book called Setting the Table, and it really speaks about the importance of customer experience in hospitality as an industry. And I think as brands evolve, right, they've got to think more along the lines of like you're welcoming folks into the experience that you're providing online or offline, right? It's basically you're running like a hotel, and so taking in those precepts are super important as you kind of borrow grow your brand, and that's really what creates stickiness. That's what really creates loyalty, because people remember you for the experiences that you give them and the emotions that you make them feel. They don't remember you because of the products that you bought from them at that point in time. And I think a classic example of that is like just this focus on every time that you kind of buy an Apple product, I think you'll see that it's perfectly packaged for that experience, even when you open it, right? Even when you unbox it. And there's a reason why, because that's the reason why you remember those products. That's the reason that you buy those products in the first place. Right? It's not just purely because those products are functionally better than anything else right there.
Yeah.
So
and
go ahead, Martin.
yeah, Michael, sorry to interrupt you, but this is very interesting because all of these things that we consider very important as a buyer and also as when we go to a restaurant, but as you say, Michael, the food is maybe 30 or 40% of what's important. The service and everything matters much more. But all of that can't be done on a marketplace like Amazon. Like Amazon doesn't let you do whatever you want in the customer journey. Like actually they control everything and they don't even let you put things into your package, for example, like to say thank you or to say, hey, if you want to contact us, you can do it through here, or if you need any support on using the product, go to this website. Like this can't be done at all on something like Amazon. And which means like you can't have a great customer experience. You can't really, like customize everything and make your customers feel great. And was that kind of a starting point as well for you to focus on the journey for your customer, for the people that you work with, or did your starting point for you was different?
Yes.
And I'll probably do a quick one-liner on that. And the starting point for us actually was the fact that we both worked on a Walmart subsidiary, like Mintra that we worked on. It's a subsidiary of Walmart in India, right? And we built out, we kind of productized experience, I would say. We built out products for revenue and category teams to create the right experiences, of course, leading to conversions, but to create the right experiences, right? And, the starting point for us was, Martin, that realizing that experience is so pivotal every single day to anything beyond the homepage, to conversions, to PDP, like all the things we talked about, AOVs and CLVs and, conversion rates, and they're all anchored on this thing called experience. And, we saw the amount of technology muscle it took, to actually make that a business as usual, function within the Walmart group, right? It's a lot of different engineering teams, design teams, marketing teams, everybody coming together to actually create those experiences every single day, make it like really seamless for people to buy, right? And decide and buy. And realizing that, these guys have that muscle. You can do it because you're a Walmart subsidiary. Like, what about the rest of the world, the rest of the 99% of the retail space? That was the starting point for us, realizing how important experience is, and then looking at the rest of the world and realizing that, hey, we are a lot of people and we are trying to solve this problem.
Can we talk a little bit about how that
Super
technology
interesting.
muscle, sorry, is
Super
employed?
interesting, and that's right. Like the only way to access this kind of experience is to go on Amazon or Walmart, right? So like DTC stores can't build, like most of the time they don't have tools to do this kind of super customized or highly interesting customer journey that's gonna, at the end of the day, increase, as you said, sales, AOV, LTV, and all of these things, which is crucial into a more competitive e-commerce landscape, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Can we talk about how that technology muscle is actually used to create better experiences, just to give people an idea?
Yeah, I think a large part of it starts. I mean, if you look at the entire funnel in terms of like just setting up a store and ensuring that your store is like kind of fresh, relevant, and engaging for customers at any given point of time, there's a
Yep,
bunch of things that happen behind the scenes. And
Mhm.
maybe I'll just give a little bit of a
please.
unwrapping of all of those sets of things. This really, it goes from like, what category teams are speaking with brands. Brands have their own voice and they have their own content. But that content needs to get created and produced. So you're kind of working hand in glove with designers. You are working hand in glove with copywriters to kind of create some of this content. But that's a stage one of content creation. Once you've got some of this content done, to even get this content done, you have to do production sometimes, which is like shooting, maybe taking video shoots, photographs, all of that stuff happen. You kind of bring all of it together and then kind of say that, hey, there's this, all of these videos, content, and text that you kind of created, and you now got to ensure that our consumers can at the end of the day consume this content, right? And there's a big machinery in between which kinds of helps do that. Some part of it is personalization tech, some part of it is content management stuff, some part of it is merchandising stuff, and there's a lot of these engines working behind the scenes. Oftentimes a brand comes in and they kind of get access to only these creator centered tools, right? So they're
Right.
just creating this content, they're probably not seeing this middle layer of merchandising, personalization, and content management in between. And this seems like super complicated, right? Which is why you have these big marketplaces usually making these big bets and big investments into these complex systems. Unless you kind of make these systems super simple and bring it to more creator friendly tech, it really becomes harder for brands to kind of look beyond of marketplaces to scale out their own customer experiences. And that's what Martin was also alluding to earlier. Like the customer journeys are becoming so much more uh, connected in some sense, and they're becoming multi-touch. It's harder unless you kind of get access to tools which kind of help you do that easily.
So we've talked a lot about marketplaces, and if you look at if you listen to what we think about marketplaces and the evolution of e-commerce, right? We do think they're super noisy. And as Martin was alluding to earlier, we think that discovery, I want to break this down into a few different components, right? But discovery on marketplaces for smaller brands is really hard, right? Like it's like having a gigantic, what's it called? Like a gigantic store, and your store is like in the shadow behind it on a back alley somewhere, and nobody can get to it, right? Because all they see is this big department store in front of it, and all they really want is your really bespoke shoes, right? It's really hard to do it. So this discovery thing is actually really important to me. And plus, as more and more people, like, there's a supply demand problem too, right? And I wonder how this is mitigated. But the more and more people that put their stuff on marketplaces, the more expensive discovery or creating discovery becomes. How do we fix that? And I want to talk about discovery first, then I want to talk about conversion and retention, because these are the three things that are super important to me. Can you just talk about this discovery thing first?
Yeah, so I mean, much like you rightly said, as you kind of bringing out more brands, discovery is becoming harder.
Yeah.
The way that marketplaces obviously deal with it is that they tend to give this very hyper personalized stuff to folks, kind of show you stuff that they want to do, but at the same point of time, who gets you to see that? So there's
Who gets,
boosting,
yeah, and who gets
who,
prominence, right?
who gets
Yeah.
prominent. So then they basically become the gatekeepers.
Yep.
And that's where they make the money as well. They basically charge you for every time that you've got to push up. So Amazon ads, which is why it's one of the most lucrative business and growing fastest growing businesses, because that gives you prominence into the select box, whether you get into the box where you can actually be purchased by a customer in the first place. That's only how you can get noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, and can I make an offline analogy to
Yeah.
this? It's like if you and I have a store next to each other, right? And that store, right? I put a neon sign on my store. And then you put a bigger neon sign on your store. Then I put more neon signs on my store. And at some point, the signs just become irrelevant and people start ignoring it and they start going to other places. Does that make sense, right? So how do you
Yeah.
mitigate that? Like, what are you doing? What is Mason doing from a tech standpoint to make sure that that discovery is still okay?
Yeah, so I think the key part about being discovery as channels are becoming, there are more and more channels for people to find stuff these days. There's direct to
Yep.
consumer
Yep.
channels where you're kind of establishing your relationship with the customer and helping customers, in fact, to become advocates and to become your own evangelists where they're helping you find other customers as well because they share stuff that they love and they share stuff that they like. And
Yeah.
if you see at the heart of it comes interaction, there's a communication and there's this interaction between the brand and the consumer who's purchasing the product from you. And if the consumer can interact with the brand and if the consumer can take the brand's voice and can share it back, that's really where the tools for creation really become easier.
So
And
how
if
does
you
how does
see,
that happen? How does that sharing and that inter brand, the brand to the consumer and back communication happen?
yeah, so what at Mason, what we're doing, a large part of what we're doing is bringing these creator-friendly tools at the hands of brands, where brands can create experiences which can bring consumers into the conversation.
Tell
So,
me.
in within the stores, brands can today launch out experiences which help uh, anybody who's purchasing from the store to not only stop at the purchase but to engage beyond the purchase, whether it's over email, whether it's on store where they can basically leave their feedback, share their experiences in terms of how they have used the product, and they can launch a bunch of these. So it's basically bringing the consumer with the brand into a conversation, and this conversation leads to further discovery because the
So,
consumer suddenly feels a lot more connected.
yeah, so can I ask this too? I'm always curious about this, right? So let's say there's brand A and I love brand A and I shop there and I have this kind of back and forth. I'm sitting on the brand's platform, right? Because you're building tools that allow it to be easier for me, enables me to more easily communicate back and forth with the brand. But let's
Yeah.
say I want my cousin who lives in a different city or a different country also to be able to do it or to shop with me or understand that process with me. And I want to communicate with them at the same time I'm communicating with the brand. I hope this makes sense. Are you enabling that as well? Do you know why? Because shopping is like this very social experience, right? Hey, Barry, let's go get some new cricket wickets or whatever it is together. It's much more fun to do it together than to do it alone. Are you enabling that too? Is that part of the plan or is it already in?
Yeah, I mean that's one thing that's on the roadmap. That's also one thing that's launching pretty soon. I think this is one thing that Cos and I have always been talking, even back at the Walmart group when we had started out about making shopping a lot more social. Because what you
Yeah.
really want to do is that shop together. You don't go and say that, hey, I'll go purchase this, especially in offline retail, that I'm just going to buy something for myself and there's nobody with me.
Right.
It's usually
Yeah.
about you going together and really about bringing that same experience even while you're online. Can you pull in people into the same shopping experience together where they can see each other as they're buying, they can interact with each other over the same brand channel, and that's really what we're kind of moving towards.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason it's in the roadmap, right? And we are not saying the reason it is live today is because your majority, and when I say majority, it's like 99% of your brands are still struggling with step A, which is how do I make the experiences good for one individual, and then how do I make that experience good for the individual and the individual social circle, right? And brands are still at step one. What Barry was talking about, which is essentially, hey, forming that one-on-one connection. By the way, your product details page on Amazon is the only, and on that your image, like all the carousel of images that you get or whatever reviews you can sneak it,
Yep.
that's literally the
That's
only
it.
real estate you have. That's it, right? But how do you optimize that? And for example, can we give people the ability to connect their review collection system, like for example a Judge.me or a Lux or a Yotpo or whatever that is? Can we connect that with a content system, and help you create good looking testimonial or review kind of cards that can be maybe the second image in your carousel. So how do we help you utilize that image carousel that you have itself to bring in customer testimonials, to bring in more information about the products, to bring in more trust, to bring in more credibility, to bring in more information about where the products come from, like the ingredients, right? Is it single origin? Is it sustainable? These are important for consumers. So how do we help you utilize that little bit of real estate you get to form as much of a connection that you can? And once you can leverage that and you get lucky and someone lands in your brand, then can we help you double click on it and really now go crazy and help that connection really amp up, right? That's I mean, people are still struggling from Amazon PDP to their store today, but definitely social commerce, and how do we bring people. Social commerce is not just like people chatting with each other.
No.
It's actually an immersive interactive experience. So how do we get it to that is definitely on the roadmap and its next step. But I think today the problem is that brands are still struggling with the first part, which is how do I even form a one-on-one connect?
There's so much great stuff in that. And I really feel like I've learned something about Kaus today. And that is, I really feel like you care about ESG, sustainability, and I forget what you said, single origin coffee, but we'll get back to that.
I do. Single origin chocolates too, by the way.
Chocolates too. And I love it. But again, there's purpose behind this. Here's the other thing though, right? Is that I feel like every time we try to help e-commerce providers, e-commerce sellers do the next thing, help them from discovery, help them on conversion, help them on retention, is that we're asking them to build much more complicated technology. It's hard, right? In other words, if I had to go out and rebuild all the tech that I use to do what I do, and what I do is relatively simple. I'm chatting with people and recording it, right? But I could never I myself personally could never build all of the tools around this recording. And, think about me rebuilding Adobe Audition. Like that would be impossible just to edit stuff. This sounds really complicated to build. Like, is this just another thing? Because you said struggling, and I can just imagine if you've got to struggle to build this. I want to give you an analogy, right? In the old days, if you wanted to start up a company, you had to build your own servers from scratch. And now you just kind of sign up to AWS or Azure or whatever cloud company you want, right? You get all these services with it. How hard is it to build this tech for an e-commerce seller? It sounds very complicated to me.
And it is. It's like kind of rebuilding Amazon's, core tech advantage of personalization, as Barry said, merchandising, personalization, sales and promotion. How do you, content management systems, how do you pull all of that together for a small team? And Barry will add on to that.
Yeah, I think there's this couple of interesting analogies that you give, but also like what we are kind of also, as you speak more with brands, speak more with merchants, it's like, what, we love building the products that we build. Our core is this product and being able to sell it. And all of a sudden, this tech seems like I have to transform all of that to becoming a technology company. Right. And just doing completely else altogether, right? And that's like completely shifting out really what they're doing, right? And it's exactly like you said, as a podcaster, if you had to go about creating Adobe Audition, you suddenly go out from becoming somebody who's recording and creating content in media to suddenly becoming a whole different person who's basically going to be managing a technology team to say, hey, how do I figure out what audio latencies can work at, what kind of transcoding can I do? It's a whole different problem altogether, right? And you basically need, what you really need to do is to tie up and work together with specialists who kind of build that, but make it accessible for you, right?
Right.
And I see that also being repeated a large part in the US. A lot of these e-commerce companies, if you know, were invested in building out their own systems. This now slowly starting to see that, hey, like we can't build everything from scratch. We need to kind of lean in on what software is available, because software is kind of changing rapidly. Even the software ecosystem is kind of evolving super rapidly. And to bring in the best of tools, we need to partner with the people who are creating these best of tools, the best of breed solutions, and then leverage them to kind of do what we do best, which is put these products out in front of the consumers and ensure that we communicate to them right, ensure that we can understand them right, and that's really what we do best.
But how much code? So if I'm an e-commerce seller, right? I mean, how much code am I going to have to write to do this stuff and to accomplish all this stuff? Because that's the key for me, right? In other words, if I had to go, like I said, rewrite Audition, I'd be spending all my time doing that, and I'd never be recording and having great conversations like this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just from a pure number of lines of code perspective, today we do about a couple of millions of lines of code.
Yeah, for you, you
So,
do. But how about
yeah,
for me? If I'm the seller, right? How much code
yeah,
do I have to write to be able to use these tools?
You
Because it sounds
you would
complex.
you would,
yeah.
if you
So,
wanted to even you like use some of these tools, you would, to implement it in your infrastructure, etc. It would not, it would be equivalent a couple of million lines of code. But the beauty is that today there are starting to emerge no code and self-serve solutions in
Got it.
retail that are actually helping you get away from those millions of lines of code and probably do a couple of clicks instead.
yeah, and I think it comes to what we allude to, this no code evolution that's happening
Go
rapidly
ahead.
across the world. And I think a large part of the creator economy really coming together to kind of connect with this. I also see this engineers and people who code also as a form of artists, but these creators and these engineers kind of coming to collaborate together is really through this no code phenomenon, right? Because no code is really about making the ability to kind of build some of these workflows and express yourself without really learning how to talk to a system and code it yourself, right? And so what we are seeing today is this phenomenon, this no code phenomenon, I think is a very compelling movement globally, which is going to bring a lot more people to collaborate over this massive digital space that we kind of all today coexist also in, right? So, and these tools are just at the starting point today. In e-commerce specifically, for a merchant today to come online, as you know, it's become super simple. Right? I mean, you
Yeah.
get started with a Shopify store. I mean, you don't need to learn to code how to do that.
Mhm.
You can get started on day one on a Shopify store. But really, to get beyond just starting off your store to really kind of operating at a grade of an Amazon, there's still a gap in between. And that's really some part of that gap which this no code movement still needs to fill back in. But really, that's really going to be really empowering for these brands and creators in the days to come.
Yeah. Look, my feeling about retail, whether it's online or offline, is that it has to be, what's the right word? Immersive. And we can spend a lot of time talking about the metaverse, but let's just stay away from there for a moment. Although I do think it's relevant, right? I don't want to walk into a store physically where nobody's there. They're just a bunch of products on the shelves, and I can't ask anybody anything or experience anything. It's very, what's the right word? Generic. And I think that right now, a lot of online stores are like that. Even if the products are beautiful, it's very non-interactive in a way, right? So, like, how do we, I don't know what the right word is, but like, how do we modernize that whole experience so that when people theoretically walk into an e-commerce store, they don't feel like they're alone and they feel like there's more interaction, if that's the right thing to say. Like, how does that work?
So, Michael, absolutely, like this is one of those points that we've been speaking
That
about. Is the
keeps
stores
Barry
does,
awake.
yeah, the
That
stores.
keeps
Very
Barry
awake at
awake at
night.
night.
Yeah.
So
So,
I don't need to text him at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's already awake thinking about this.
He's
That's good.
always,
yeah,
we've been thinking about it all night.
yeah. Stores are like the shelves today, but really stores need to convert themselves into more like where we kind of have a lot of fun. Imagine going into a game and the game does not. You can't do anything in the game. You can just watch the game. Stores are
Yeah,
really,
it's boring, right?
yeah. That's pretty much what stores are like today, right? I can just watch stuff. There's very little to do over there
Yeah.
in the
And it
physical
hasn't
stores
changed
today.
in 25
Yeah.
years, has it? Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's really, I think it's moving. It's moving, but it's moving pretty slow because there's still like a lot of stuff. There are few people who are kind of pushing the boundaries there, but there's very few of them who are kind of doing it, and it's simply because it's super hard to do, kind of to
Yeah, it
really
is.
make this super interactive and immersive environments where you can really like not only kind of walk into the store, but you can converse with maybe who's on the other side of the brand. Can I speak to the brand directly? Can I speak to other people who are shopping these products? Can I have those
Right.
conversations with them, right? Can I try the product out on my own, maybe in a wholly virtual environment, right? Can I see how it looks in my room, right? And can I try it out in other kinds of settings, right? And so this lots of these possibilities that definitely need to be bridged in, but it's really super hard for brands to do. But that's really the direction in which the, what you say, customer experience would be headed out for these stores.
Is Mason building all? Sorry to interrupt you, Kaus, but is Mason building all these? Because these are a lot of individual components, right? That need to be combined together into sort of a seamless platform that allows me, if I'm an e-commerce seller, right, and I have my own store, how can then I use the tools that are being created? Is Mason doing this so that then I can make that whole experience more interactive and then, to be sure, much more differentiated? No.
Yeah. And I mean, fundamentally, if you step back, right, what does it need? What does it take to actually bring these interactive experiences? One
Right.
side, it needs great design, right?
Yep.
It needs you to have great design. The second is that it needs you to have good data, because it needs data. And when I say data, it's not just like, who clicked where or which
Yeah.
customer, but also my pricing and, what are my product information. So all these sorts of different, what promotions can I run, my coupons. So all the data needs to be connected into into the same system. So I have to bring design and data into one system. Right.
Interesting.
So fundamentally, that's where it is. And of course, the third element to that is that now can I create playbooks, right? By using the data and the design, can I create different kinds of playbooks and test out for different cohorts of customers what kind of gameplay sort of works, right? So fundamentally, it means that you need a system which connects data and design together. And on top of that, you now need to be able to create gameplays, right? To be able to actually create those experiment with it and understand what experiences and funnels and flows work for different kinds of customers. So fundamentally at Mason, that's what we're doing. We're actually connecting data and design together. We're bringing these two very diverse things on the same page, right? And we are helping you create gameplays in a very no-code way on top of that. Right?
What do you mean by gameplay? Sorry, for people that may not understand what that is.
So for example, an example of a gameplay is that if I'm a new customer, and use a very, very simple example. If I am a new customer, if I'm a new consumer who's new on a certain brand,
Right.
I usually want to know, is it a trustworthy brand? Is it like, are other people buying from it or not? So if you just want to package both of these questions together into something called bestsellers, right? So can you show me, the right kind of most interesting updated bestsellers? It kills two birds in one stone. One, it tells me that other people are buying here, so I'm safe, right? And second, it's exciting me. It's like it's the bestseller today, right? And maybe you can add in another layer to it and say that this bestseller could go out of stock in the next 7 days because it's like really hot, right? So I think that's one kind of a gameplay, I would say, a playbook and a funnel that you can actually put out there for your new users. That's an example of a game, and it can get more complicated, and you can layer on a lot more over there.
For sure.
Yeah, and Michael, it's about making these interactive environments and these more immersive environments. At Mason, what we get merchants and get stores to do is that kind of ensure that they can create some of these more interactive and immersive environments without really having to learn, much like you said, the entire engineering bandwidth that's needed to do that, and which is why cost alluded to this no-code aspect of it. So we are really helping brands to kind of self-serve themselves into this more immersive experiences for customers, more dynamic storefronts in some sense.
So for the first time, and if I'm reading the news correctly, and you'll see where this is going in a second, this gets back to this data and design. I love the combination, this idea of combining these two things together because they feel like they're fundamentally opposed to each other. And I'm designing something, so it must come from the gut. I must be super, creative, and I'm doing data, which must means I'm just thinking numbers. Now, fundamentally, I believe that's not true, but that's the way the world looks at this, right? So combining those two things together and building tools around that, I think is super interesting. For the first time, I think ever, iOS, so Apple devices, I think, have either outsold or they outnumber Android devices in the United States, which is not the only market in the world, but it's a bellwether market at least, right? It's not the biggest market anymore either. But does that, and we saw all these changes in iOS 14.5, I think, or 14.6, I can't remember, that changed the way that data gets shared and cookies and all these other things that are changing. How does that fundamentally change the way a company like Mason looks at how to use that information that you're getting and then continue to build it into the processes of combining that data and design together?
So I think what iOS 14.5 really does is about third-party cookie tracking and about
Yep.
ensuring privacy is at the hands of consumers. I think
Yep.
what brands need to invest is in first-party data. Really, it's about knowing your customer, and it goes back to what we spoke about earlier. It's about the customer experience, and it's about making the connection to the customers. Customers are willing to share, by the way, data with brands as long as they know that brands are safeguarding that data. Brands can use that to have better communication, right? Because all of
Yep.
us love to get stuff that's relevant for us, and we don't want to walk into a store and or purchase from the brand again and say that, hey you, I don't know you, come buy again. I've
Yeah, I
never
mean,
seen
look,
you.
I had breakfast. I'm not at home, right? I'm in Singapore, so I'm not in the place where I normally live. And there's a restaurant down the street that I like to go to. And if I
Hmm.
give them a little bit of data, they give me an $8 discount. I do it every single time I go. Do you know what I mean? And I'm very careful about with whom I share my data, but I'm like 8%, $8. I'll take it. That buys me in Singapore one cup of coffee, but it's at least good enough if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
and they call you by your name when you get
yep,
in there, hopefully,
yep,
so they remember you. And so I don't think as consumers we kind of mind sharing our data as long as things get personalized back to us, as long as we
I agree.
understand that the brand's got that intent right about basically
Yep.
helping us find the right products, the right getting us the best prices and all of that together, right? So this construct of like even as privacy is like a overarching movement, it's really about ensuring that brands can take this privacy movement to invest in connecting better with consumers
Yeah.
first, bringing out experiences which help them make those connections first, right? So that consumers willingly share their data and brands get the tools to kind of then deliver back that through more personalized experiences, more tailored discounts and promotions, which will help consumers stick to them.
Got it. Cause if I feel like you want to say something.
No, I think it goes back. It just connects everything that we've spoken about, together, right? Like, end of the day, creativity and technology are not dichotomies. They actually have to come together, like
Absolutely.
right. And technologists are creative people, just that they express in code, right? And the whole data and design, again, not dichotomies. These are, again, right brain, left brain. It has to sync together. It has to work together to make beautiful things. And end of the day, we were talking about storefronts of the future and how things can be more interactive and immersive and all. And that's, as Barry was saying, it's a way of bringing, interesting ways and meaningful ways for consumers to interact with you, so that you get some data out of that, right? And so you can refine the experience again. So end of the day, it's what e-commerce is lacking, or other retail is lacking today, is that in retail or anywhere else, people are thinking about things that are experience or creativity or product as separate from technology and data, right?
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think, like, that's where, like, when we start connecting both of these on a single page, on the same platform, on the same infra stack, on the same technology stack, that's when you'll start seeing these questions about why should I give my data, and why
Right.
should I shop on Amazon versus your store. All of that kind of go away, because these are not separate.
When you think about your own products, what do you think it's going to take to make online retail? And I think it's going to get there. I can give you my own opinion. What do you think it's going to take to get online retail to be as immersive as offline retail? Like the old Nike stores. I remember when I lived in Tokyo, Nike opened up a flagship store there and they put like a half court basketball court in there. And I just thought,
Hmm.
that is so awesome. How can I just go there and shoot hoops, even if I'm not buying anything? But by definition, if I'm there long enough, I'm going to buy something, right? A tank top, some running shorts, some basketball shoes, even just a basketball, right? When does online retail get to be that immersive, and what's it going to take to get us there?
Yeah, I think maybe we'll need to look at it slightly differently. The online and offline experiences, I think they will be slightly adjacent. I mean, obviously, we can look into VR and immersive, fully immersive metaverse worlds where basically maybe we can get to eventually emulating the complete online offline experience. But I think like we probably need to take it a step jump at a time and like kind of think about like what's the
Go
most
ahead.
interactive stuff that we kind of do online today. We play
Yep.
games, right? I mean, a large part of what we do online interactivity is about games, right? And I think maybe the right question that uh, brands need to be asking is that can we make it as a first step a shopping experience as engaging as a game experience today is,
So
as
so
dynamic as a game experience today is.
So should online sellers start using Unreal Engine and build around Unity, two different ways to build these immersive experiences so that the shopping experience feels more like a like a first person shooter or RPG. I don't know what the I don't play games, but you know what I mean? Like using these technologies that are super immersive. I mean, how long has Unreal Engine has been worked on for what 20 something years, right? So this stuff is kind of amazing. Are you suggesting that that's where we're going with this as well, or am I just
Yeah,
fantasizing about this?
I think on the one hand, there's obviously Unity, but there's obviously this need for this commerce engine to evolve, and I think which is why Mason's also a big bet is basically like as game engines have evolved today, game developers do not think about building a game engine from scratch. They think about
No, never. You
using a
wouldn't do it.
game.
It's too
Yeah,
hard.
it's too and it's too stupid also, right? I mean, you just custom forge it for one thing, and basically it would not work for a lot of different use cases, right? And so most e-commerce sellers probably need to think about having like a commerce engine, which basically
So
kind of creates this very dynamic and interactive experiences for uh, the
sorry, I'm
consumers.
just excited. But are you saying in the same way that like Unreal Engine is the engine that's used to build games and Unity as well? You want people to like literally sit around in a cafe and go, "Are you building on Mason?" Because that gives you the interactive and the immersive ability to build stuff. Is that the same thing here?
Yep, that's why we are kind of speaking to
Yeah.
merchants about having
Yeah.
the same thing about built on Mason, which helps them kind of bring the same kind of interactive experiences, very immersive storefronts and very dynamic storefronts that kind of engage customers.
So how far along in that type of product development are you? In other words, do you Intel kind of popularize this, right? It says like Intel Inside. Do you do this powered by Mason kind of thing so people look at the store and think, oh, I get it, and it kind of looks like a Mason style store because it's using all these tools that Mason has built? Is that fair?
Yeah, so we do that where we basically have this powered by Mason small brand marks at this point of
Sections
time
in
for
the
different
store.
sections in the store. And the idea is to have these custom forged stores. But really, it's about, again, accessibility. Like a large part of it is like as you kind of go in this journey, right? Uh, this merchants all from small to a little scaled out and bigger merchants. And you don't want everyone to throw away everything that they've built, right? You want
Yeah.
everyone to upgrade, not replace and migrate to
Yes.
anything that they have. So you want to
Sure,
plug
sure,
in.
sure.
Yeah, and which is why we kind of bring in the ability for merchants to really upgrade their storefronts with Mason. And so there's powered by Mason, but that's really powered by Mason in the storefront. And you can see these very distinctive experiences in the stores today for the merchants that we work with.
So if I build on a back end, I don't know how to say this the right way. Is it headless? Do you know what I mean? In other words, can I
Yeah,
Yeah.
use can I so it is.
Yep.
So that makes it, and what is it, API connected to this? Is it cloud native as well? So like I can have my store kind of anywhere. I don't know what the right answer to that is, and then connect to the Mason engine so that the front no that the so you build in the back end stuff, so I can have any front end I want, but the back end is built by Mason kind of thing.
So it's actually about, so I think you touch upon on some of these right things, but it's about really having these front end experiences that are being powered in a headless manner.
Go ahead.
So it connects to all of your e-commerce platform stuff. It's your pricing, your promotions, your catalog, your inventory systems, your
Right.
customer systems, right? So it takes all of that, and that's really just pure data, right, coming in about all of these
Yep.
different things that are happening, right?
And that's
But
API connected,
really,
yeah.
that's all API connected, right?
Go
But it's
ahead.
really about these consumer experiences, which is on your storefront, and that's not really as dynamic today, right? What we're taking in is all of these API connected systems, and Cost mentioned this layer of playbooks. They're helping you create these very dynamic experiences in your stores today, and that's really what Mason helping you do. It's this middle engine which is helping you bridge this gap between data and your design, which is your stores.
So can I
It's
do this? Can I? So sorry, cuz I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just have this idea and I want to make sure I don't forget it. Is it then possible to do this in a way that's so fast and so what's the right word? Like so easy and seamless that if an event is coming up or if a holiday is coming up, I can like
mm,
reskin my store to look like, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but just to make it right, like Diwali or to Christmas or to New Year's or to something. And then when it's done, I can take that down and put back the store up and make it look normal. The way they do it, on the store in Fifth Avenue where they decorate it for like Thanksgiving or whatever. Can we do that
you
as well?
nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it. So literally, that's like the next evolution, right? Right. Right now, as Barry said, when you go to market, you don't want to cause that whole I need to replace my entire stack
Everything, yeah.
problem, right? Yeah.
Right.
So what we started out with is essentially, hey, you don't need to replace everything. You can change, parts of your store to make it more dynamic, make it more interactive, and then going on to something as interesting as, hey, Lunar New Year is coming up.
Yep.
I can just skin it and reskin it, and turn it on and off on a schedule, right? To then eventually in the near future going to my entire store itself is completely connected and dynamic, and at any point in time I can hyper personalize it to like literally individual users
Can
based on
you?
where it is.
Because that was going to be my next question. In other words,
Yes.
like you may or may not know which holidays I celebrate, right? Or which country I'm in, but I know like through your IP address, unless you're using a VPN, like you're in India. So you're going to celebrate a certain sort of select amount of things. And if you're in Israel, you're going to celebrate other things.
Yeah.
Can I know where you're coming from and then change the skin on my store so that it reflects that? Do you know what I mean? So that like this person A will look at it in a different way, the person B will, but it's still the same products. Yeah.
Yes, that's the direction that we are moving towards, which is that you can literally do that today.
Wow. Is it, do you feel like there are other ways where you can use, because it feels to me like, again, like you're building this engine, right? Not a specific not a specific tool, but this whole engine is going to get built. Are there other places you can use it? Other online places, not just e-commerce stores? Not that that's not big enough, but do you see other applications for this? Like could a bank use it, or could a trading house use it, or all these other places that can get used?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I love that question because literally, I think Barry and I were talking about it very recently too. And it's anywhere that there's commerce, right? So anywhere that you want to give people the right experience to take a decision to buy. So that can be banking, that can be travel, that can be SaaS products. It doesn't matter, right? But anywhere where you need people to get the right experience to help them make a decision to buy. Barry, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. No, I think
I feel like Barry's writing down notes. I wish I had a pen and a paper. I'm just trying to remember everything. It's so hard because it's such a great conversation. Go ahead, Barry.
no, I think it's about getting, as Kaus was saying, right? It's just not looking at e-commerce only, but it's looking beyond e-commerce to anybody who's online and anybody who's digital, right?
Right.
Really, and has a website. And I think this need for being able to connect to customers goes just beyond commerce, right? It goes beyond anybody, like whether you're a bank and you have your consumers, or whether you are a SaaS company and if you're selling to your to whoever's buying your products, you need this ability to connect to your consumers, right? And you need to be able to personalize this experience to your consumers, right? But being able to personalize this experience, being able to tailor this experience where you understand customers who are sharing with you first party data, but being able to give them back through these personalized experiences is really tough today. And Mason as an engine, I think we intend to plug in this gap today for all of these merchants and all of these people who are online.
What is the sales cycle like for Mason? Excuse me. When you go to somebody who's running an e-commerce site or any other place where you think that this could be useful and you show them what's possible, what is the reaction that you get? Like, how long does it take for them to say, "Oh, I get this now. I think I need this thing." Do you know what I mean?
That's where we are starting. As I said, we started with like incremental upgrades versus a full transformation.
Sure.
Because as we've been in massive giant e-commerce companies ourselves, and it's a lot of decision making. It's build versus buy, and you have a lot of different stakeholders having to come together to actually see the vision and say that, hey, let's all transform, right? So our take on it was that, hey, let's in the early days, let's go high velocity. Let's think about how do we help everybody upgrade bits and pieces, right? Upgrade the most important experiences in their store, the most impactful, the most the experiences that lead to the highest conversion, that lead to the most orders. Can we impact that and get it so simple and self-serve that they literally can just install the product and do it themselves. We don't have to come and sell anything, right? So that's how we go to market.
Do you use your own website as an example to show people what it can look like? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's not only the website. I think one key part of it was like making it so simple. Simplicity is like kind of like a hard thing to achieve, but simplicity is also one of those things.
Simplicity is the most complex thing in the world. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but as you kind of get into merchants, these are creators. These are individual folks who are kind of launching the stores. They can't run with super complex stuff, which is why usually they would go in and sell in on a marketplace, because the marketplace takes care of that, right? For us, it was really key that we can make it super simple and they can get to understand the value on day one that they start using the product. So for us, this, as you speak about sales cycle, as you speak about how soon can merchants realize value, for us, the benchmark really is getting merchants to understand this value in 5 minutes, not really in a day, right? So
Yeah.
log in into the product. Can you see this value up front? Right? Can you see how it really transforms the life for your merchants up front? And that's really how we kind of benchmark value for us.
So before I let you go, I want to know, how long has Mason been around? Like, what is the status of its, existence and its state of being right now?
I love that. Our state of being is roughly it's a toddler now. It's 2 years old. It's just
Just like I am. Okay, perfect.
just like you. And so we launched on, again, taking the whole thing about how do we make it super simple? How do we get people to instantly be able to see, use it and find value? We launched it on the Shopify App Store first. In 2020, about, I think, May to June. So it's just been a little over 2 years, toddler, as I said. And the state of being today, or the next phase, rather, the being that we are looking at evolving it into, is now we know we've found product market fit. We have our first set of adopters. We literally grew, 33% month on month, all of last year, all the last 12 months. So it's been like crazy.
I don't know what to say. This is why Barry doesn't sleep, by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. But now it's about how do we, as Barry was saying, and you were talking about, how do we move, more steps closer to the engine, to the whole storefront engine, and move from just helping you upgrade very minimal parts of your store to actually delivering more connected experiences across your store.
Got it. Okay, look, I think that's the best way to end. I'm going to let both of you go. Kausambi, Manjita, and Barada, Sahu, co-founders of Mason. I hope you had as much fun doing this as we did. That was awesome. Thank you.
We had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having us.
But you got to come back. This is not the last time. You got to come back. I want to see progress in 6 months. You can come back and tell me more. Thank you again.
For sure. All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.